Hello everybody. I wanted to direct this video to liberals. Um, a lot of liberals in the US believe that free markets or less regulation is what created the financial crisis of 2008. And that's the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act uh, by Bill Clinton created the fertile ground for the bankers to gamble with depositors' money, because the Glass-Steagall Act uh, was a law that restricted the restricted the restricted commercial banks and security firms to work together, or for commercial banks to gamble with depositors' money. So they say that this created the financial crisis, and that the solution is that there should be more regulation. And they say that we've seen that free markets just simply don't work. Free markets should be regulated in order to work. But that's just misinformed. Because the system that we have now is not free market at all. And if you want to be thoroughly, if you want your analysis to be correct, you should go a little bit back in history. Before the Glass-Steagall Act, namely the Federal Reserve Act. That's where you have to look at. That's the cause of the problem. The Federal Reserve Act has been created by Congress, by the United States government. Is this free market? Is the Federal Reserve a central bank free market? No, not at all. A free market is an economical structure, or whatever you want to call it, with no interference of the government. So if the government creates a Federal Reserve through an act of Congress and puts in place legal tender laws that forces the people to use the money created by the Federal Reserve, then this has nothing to do with free markets. So if you want to criticize the banks, and if you want to solve the problem, then you should end the Federal Reserve Act. Because the Federal Reserve Act is a tool that those big bankers use to print excessive amounts of money, lend it out to the people, and collect huge interests. So I hear a lot of liberals that say, oh, like prominent liberals, like they say, yes, those criminal bankers should go to jail because they gambled with people's money and whatever, blah blah blah, and it's all because of the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, or because of because of lesser regulations, because of free markets. They blame it on the free market, but they don't know what they're talking about. So what is the solution to this problem? Should we have less regulation or more regulation? In my opinion, we should have less regulation only when you repeal the Federal Reserve Act. Now, what is the Federal Reserve Act? Okay. The Federal Reserve, I got this from Wikipedia. The Federal Reserve Act is an act of Congress that created and set up the Federal Reserve System, the central banking system of the United States of America, and granted it the legal authority to issue Federal Reserve notes, now commonly known as US dollar, and Federal Reserve banknotes as legal tender. The act was signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson. So liberals magically forget this fact, that we have a Federal Reserve that can print the nation's money supply. Is this free market? No, not at all. What is legal tender? Let's click on the words. Legal tender is a medium of payment, US dollars, allowed by law or recognized by a legal system to be valid for meeting a financial obligation. What does this mean? Let's read. Paper currency is a common form of legal tender in many countries. The origin of the term legal tender, blah 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 blah. Boo, 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 boo. Blah blah blah. Formally, it is anything which, when offered in payment, extinguish the debt. So if I provide a service, you give me $1, the debt is considered extinguished. Even if I say, oh, I don't want your money. This money is worth nothing. I have to accept it. The judge says, yeah, you don't have a debt. The debt is extinguished. Even if you don't want to accept it, you have to accept it. So we are forced to use this money. Is this free market? No, it's not free market. It's a totalitarian. You have to use the money that the Federal Reserve prints or the European Central Bank prints. And not only that, you also have to pay your taxes in dollars or in euro. So if you have to use that money, then it's not free markets. So what's wrong with the Federal Reserve? Well, criticism. Controversy about the Federal Reserve Act and the establishment of the Federal Reserve System has existed since prior to its passage. Blah 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 blah. Some of the questions raised include whether the Federal Reserve is a public cartel of private banks, also called a banking cartel, established to protect powerful financial interests, and whether the Federal Reserve's actions increase the severity of the Great Depression. This is not important right now. So, the Federal Reserve. Who owns the Federal Reserve? The Federal Reserve is owned by private owners. Private ownership. The individual Federal Reserve banks are the operating arms of the central banking system, and they combine both public and private elements in their makeup and organization. Each bank has a 9-member board of directors, 3 elected by the commercial banks in the bank's region, and 6 chosen, 3 each by the member banks and the board of governors, to represent the public with due consideration to the interests of agriculture, commerce, industry, services, labor, and consumers. These regional banks are in turn controlled by the Federal Reserve Board, whose members are appointed by the President of the United States. Member banks, about 38% of the nation's more than 8,000 banks, are required to own capital stock, blah blah blah. This is not really important. So, Federal Reserve Bank is owned by private investors. This is fucking crazy. I mean, you have a bank that can print the nation's money, and the board of directors are directly profiting from the system. You want a practical example? Let's talk about Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon. He is the director. He was the... No, he's now the current chairman, president, and chief executive officer of JP Morgan Chase, one of the big 4 banks of the United States. Okay? And has served as Class A director of the board of directors of the New York Federal Reserve since January 2007. So You might say that there's a conflict of interest, don't you think? The same guy, that the director of the JP Morgan, the big bank, serves as a board of director for the Federal Reserve. So if Jamie Dimon says, "Oh, I should give my own bank $1 trillion," okay, let's do it. And then, the guy just puts money into his bank and then lends that money with interest and makes a huge amount of money. That's perfectly legal. So this is not free market. If you want to have free market, you should end this practice. You should stop this shit. You should stop the Federal Reserve Act. You should end the central bank. And what should you replace it with? Well, you should replace it with free banks, free banking. That's free market. So, free banking refers to a monetary arrangement in which banks are subject to no special regulations, blah 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 blah, and in which they are also free to issue their own paper currency, banknotes. In a free banking system, market forces control the supply of total quantity of banknotes and deposits that can be supported by any given stock of cash reserves, where such reserves consist either of a scarce commodity such as gold, or an artificially limited stock, or fiat money issued by a central bank. But in the strictest version of free banking, however, there either is no role at all for a central bank, or the supply of central bank money is supposed to be permanently frozen. Therefore, no agency capable of serving as a lender of last resort in the usually understood sense of the term, nor is there any government insurance of banknotes or bank deposit accounts. So this is the solution. Free banks. Not one bank system monopoly that controls the whole nation money supply, but multiple banks in a free market system that compete with each other to give the best services to their customers. And the banks that fuck up, they go bankrupt because the consumers go away from them and go to another bank. But in this system, the banks are too big to fail. The Federal Reserve is gigantic. If this system fails, everyone dies. I mean, there's no escape. But if you have a free banking, you have different bank. If one bank system fails, you have like multiple other mushrooming bank systems. It's not a problem. So if I want to buy a T-shirt, what is the best option for me? To go to one big corporation that creates all the T-shirts of the whole fucking country? Or in a free market system where there are multiple corporations, multiple enterprises selling T-shirts? I think the second option is better, because in the second option there is competition. If one company creates shitty T-shirts, consumers go to somewhere else. But if you go to one big corporation that makes all the T-shirts, if that corporation starts to create shitty T-shirts, there's no place I can go to. That's exactly where we are now. There's no place we can go to. The Federal Reserve, the big banks have fucked up everything, and there's no place to go to. So, the liberal argument is just false. I'm not a conservative or whatever, but I just want to say that if I see something that's false, I have to put it out. Like you have like Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks who has a correct assessment of the situation. He says like the bankers and should be put in jail, and the GlassSteagall or whatever. But he doesn't go far enough. That's a problem. A lot of liberals, they don't go far enough in history. They don't see the Federal Reserve Act. They don't see the Federal Depository Insurance Company. Let's see what that thing does. FDIC. The Federal Deposit Insurance Company is a United States government corporation. operating as an independent agency created by the Glass-Steagall Act, your so beloved Glass-Steagall Act of 1933, it provides deposit insurance which guarantees the safety of deposit in member banks, up to 250,000 per depositor per bank as of January 2012. So do you know what that means? It means that if the banks fuck up, they have the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation to bail them out. So it sounds good, you know. It sounds okay. If I put my money in Goldman Sachs and Goldman Sachs goes bankrupt, then the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation will save my ass. But that's not a good thing, because this creates an incentive for the big banks to take on huge risks. That's exactly what they did. They took on huge risks because they knew that the FDIC is going to bail their ass. They knew it. If you know that if you fuck up, your parents are going to pay the bill, you're going to create mayhem. And I know friends who created mayhem, and they knew, oh, my parents are going to take care of me. But if you know that your parents are not going to give a shit, then you're not going to do stupid shit, because you know, oh fuck, I have to repay this shit on my own. This is exactly what happened. So, free markets are not the cause of the bubbles, not the cause of the financial meltdown of 2008, not the cause of the dot-com burst of the dot-com bubble, and it's not the fault of the financial crisis that's going to come in the near future. The cause of the problem is the Federal Reserve Act, central banking, legal tender laws. Those are the real causes of the problem. And if you want to know why the dot-com bubble burst, this little side information here, what the dot-com bubble is, some of you might not know. The dot-com bubble, also referred to as an internet bubble, was the historic speculative bubble covering roughly 1995 until 2000, during which stock markets in industrialized nations saw their equity value rise rapidly from growth in the internet sector and related fields. While the latter part was a boom and bust cycle, the internet boom is sometimes meant to refer to the steady commercial growth of the internet with advent of the World Wide Web, as exemplified by the first release of the Mosaic web browser in 1993 and continuing through the 90s. But the cause of the dot-com bubble, was the Federal Reserve that gave cheap loans by lowering the interest rate. So Alan Greenspan was chairman of the Federal Reserve, and he lowered interest rates in order to stimulate the economy. So if you lower interest rates, what happens is that loans become cheap. When loans become cheap, people start to do stupid shit. They start to lend a lot of money, start to invest in internet. I mean, what the fuck? Which makes the prices of the internet websites go up. But it's artificially created by cheap interest rates, so it's a matter of time until some smart people realize, oh, this is just illusionary, so they start to sell their stocks, which makes the prices go down, which makes your stocks worth shit, so people lose a lot of money, and the economy gets wrecked. So this is created by the Federal Reserve. Then you have the housing crisis of 2008. The same thing happened. Ben Bernanke, biggest idiot ever alive, he lowered interest rates, which created, which made the banks give out cheap loans to consumers, and the consumers started buying houses en masse. The more houses that they bought, the more the price of houses went up, and because of there's no Glass-Steagall Act, so commercial banks start to gamble with mortgages, and the whole thing started crashing down because they started to lend out money to everyone, including bums and alcoholics and whatever. So they started to foreclose on people, started to sell their houses, started to get their money back. But the more houses they sold, the the more that the prices of houses start to decrease, and that's how the start, beginning of the end of the housing. I mean, that's how the housing bubble burst. Like, prices go up, people can't pay their mortgage, banks start to foreclose, start to sell houses en masse, prices plummet, and you have the financial economic meltdown of 2008. So, repeal of the Glass-Steagall is part of the problem, but the bigger problem, the big motherfucking elephant in the room, is the Federal Reserve Act, central banking, fiat currencies. That's the real problem, and free markets are not the cause of that. Okay, hope you are open-minded enough and smart enough to research this stuff on your own and don't make any fast, a lot of people just answer or reply before they even think. So research this stuff and it will illuminate your mind. See you later. Bye.